With the mid-season break now upon us, trade talk and rumours have begun to circulate once more, following some early activity from a couple of the teams. But today I want to address an addition to the trading process and system that I personally think will boost the development of young talent and promote teams filling their 12-man rosters fully. This would be through the introduction of a loan system into the Overwatch League. Although I'll stress now that this is just the beginning of a concept that could be debated and fleshed out further, so I'd love to hear your thoughts below in the comments or on my Twitter that I'll link below. To start with, I just want to explain why I think such a system should be considered and what issues it would actually solve. Right now, something I personally see as somewhat of an issue is there are a lot of players, both of high quality and young potential, that have been kept on the bench of some of the top teams, which in turn is limiting their access to growth and development through playtime or scrims. Now we've seen some players like Sleepy and Ark finding their ways out of these situations with trades to lower teams in order to be played, but there are others that whilst this sort of move would be great benefit to them, it is extremely unlikely that their own team would actually let them go. Take Flower for example. Before being eligible for the Overwatch League participation, he'd already shown off his skill and talent to the world on South Korea's World Cup team, and is widely regarded as a young, exciting talent, but is waiting to finally have his moment in the league. Yet on New York he finds himself by 4 other top DPS players, in Pine, Sabi Elby, and current starters Libero and Nene, and consequently this gives him very little chance to take to the stage, with his limited outings up to now disappointingly only being on Brig. At least in my eyes he could easily be starting on half the teams in the league right now, but it's extremely unlikely the Excelsior would be willing to let such great potential talent go without significant compensation that most teams simply can't provide. Now this brings me on to the idea of a loan system, but I don't think will be too familiar of a concept to my American audience, but to anyone who watches football, as in the real, English one, you'll perhaps already have a good idea of what I'm about to propose. It's not uncommon for some of the top teams to have a lot of young talented players that they really want to one day develop to be starters, but given the quality of players already in their side, they are normally very unlikely to see any playtime. But again, these teams don't want to just get rid of and offload players that one day might be superstars. Instead, they loan out the players to smaller or worse teams. This process sees the player go to his team for a short period of time, normally a year, with their wages being shared between the two teams. But at the end of that 1 year's spell, the player then returns to their original team they started with. This consequently allows these bigger teams to let their unused players get some experience without risking losing them in the process. As for the recipient team, whilst they might not receive the same long-term benefits, in the short term it can see these teams become a lot stronger and fills voids or holes in the team that other available talent would simply not be able to fill to the same level. Subsequently, this could also have the effect of increasing the power level of the weakest teams, albeit on a temporary basis, that in turn makes the league more competitive. Take Flower, who I'll return to for this demonstration. With him unlikely to play for this season, New York could look to send him on loan to a team like the Washington Justice. Having gone over till the end of the season, Flower would almost certainly be an immediate starter and would receive far more stage and scrim time and experience than he would have received on New York. For the Justice, this could see what was a slowly developing and improving side take the major step they need in the short term to potentially challenge for a stage playoff spot, but inject more money back into the organisation. And if they do find success, this would make attracting talent far more easier moving forward. And worst case, if the player loaned out turns out to be disastrous and having a negative impact on the team, Zephyr, the recipient team is not at risk of having to find his or her next suitor, as the player has to return to their original team once the loan is over. This sort of loan system could also have a major level of flexibility incorporated into it, as we could take someone like Fisher on Seoul, who's not been seeing playtime and could be loaned out to the end of the season to a team like Toronto. This will allow 2 stages for the Dynasty to decide whether they want to fully commit to playing with Marvel, or if they'd be happier with Fisher returning. They could then add in an option to buy with this loan, which would allow Toronto to make this temporary move permanent if Seoul are happy moving on from him. As money becomes increasingly invested into the Overwatch League, I think we might see some negative practices creep in, such as the biggest teams with the most money being able to persuade and entice the brightest prospects and potential superstars to join them over other sides. For example, New York signing someone recognised as the next Jonak to a big money deal. Obviously such a deal would make the Excelsior extremely unwilling to trade this asset away, even if they are unlikely to gain much experience or playtime at all, having to sit behind Jonak, which creates a negative space where the best players and talents are monopolised by the richest and best teams. Thereby having a loan system in place, this would, as I've explained, allow these players an outlet to advance and grow in a move that puts the player first with little to no risk involved for each side or organisation. Ultimately, This sort of system promotes spreading the wealth of talent around the league, without organisations losing out on player assets themselves, and I think this would strengthen the competitiveness and parity of the league, make it unlikely that talented players remain stagnant, sitting on the benches of top teams. One of the major criticisms to such a system might be that this has a knock-on effect of benching all the inferior talent on the worst teams, but in the end just creates a top-heavy scheme that favours the strongest ties, with loaned out rosters. This is where I could see an idea expanding further, and having a knock-on effect of developing the Tier 2 scene as well, with an injection of quality and financial security. Right now we have a two-way contract system that allows for some players on Academy contenders teams to go and play for the Overwatch League team for 2 matches a stage, but the sort of system I'm proposing, players not finding themselves playtime on the main Overwatch League rosters, could find themselves loaned out to contenders teams to allow them to compete, but at the same time providing them their secure wage that would be paid by their own Overwatch League team, and therefore not putting any financial burden on the Tier 2 scene. I feel this would not only increase the quality of play of this tier of competitive Overwatch, but also alleviate some of the concerns many orgs and players have when trying to make a living and play at that level. This could potentially even be continued further along down the competitive Overwatch ladder, and that's something that can, as I've said at the beginning of this video, be explored and worked on over time, with the league setting rules to prevent the system from being exploited and abused. And by no means I'm suggesting that this idea is perfect and should be implemented immediately. That said, I just think the introduction of player loans could have a major positive impact on the Overwatch League as soon as they were used, that ultimately promotes all the best players playing and not being kept to the bench of the strongest teams. Now I wanted to put it to you guys and get your thoughts on this idea, to see whether you like it, hate it, would alter it slightly, or anything else in the comments below, as I believe the best way for the Overwatch League to evolve and grow is through consistent debate of ideas both good and bad. And with that, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please be sure to discuss this issue or others in the comments below or on my Twitter. Otherwise, please like and subscribe so you don't miss out on this continuing Overwatch League coverage and content.